All right, it's now 7 p.m. We'll call to order the August 26th, 2020 planning board meeting. Please rise. Allegiance. We have the flag. We'll fix that someday. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can you hear me okay? Yes. All right. We have no public hearings. We'll start with old business 2015 Regeneron Discovery Drive, Building 85 for text discussion.
Stephen Hart, Hart Engineering, and with us tonight, Kyle Cherry from Regeneron, project manager Dave Yost. We were here a couple weeks ago and just had some general discussion about the fencing along the front of the new Building 20. We called it the Building 85 edition when it was going through the approval process. Again, we've got Red Mill Road, and we have 9 and 20, and we've got Discovery Drive cutting through the site. So, just to follow up on discussions that we had last week, per the approval, we had a 6-foot-high decorative aluminum fence running along the frontage of the project, and what we're looking to do is to put up a 6-foot-high black vinyl, a chain link fence with 3 strands of barbed wire, and basically that's all security reasons driven. So, I know we had talked last time, and I think a few board members were potentially going to take a drive by and maybe see what their thoughts were as far as what is currently up there. If you had any feedback on that. The intent from Regeneron is to still go with the 6-foot-high chain link with the barbed wire black vinyl, similar to what's on a fair amount of the campus right now.
Myself and Jim Moore met down there about 1 o'clock today. It does look a little less sinister than I anticipated. I don't know what your opinion is. We were both thinking it was razor wire, not barbed wire.
What I envisioned in my mind's eye was worse than what it actually is, but I still don't think the proposal is a good one. In that it's frontage on a public street, one that's supposed to be currently is pedestrian friendly. So I think in the basic principle, the aluminum picket fence serves the public realm interest better than the chain link fence with barbed wire strands, but if security measures need to be met, there should be other ways to attain to satisfy both.
I didn't realize there was so much barbed wire and fencing already in place, because I just drove there.
Adam, how is that done through a building permit?
I don't believe so. Kyle and I spoke about this. I think maybe Kyle, if you want to, my understanding is that there's different units within Regeneron. One is responsible for operations, one is responsible for project development, and I think Kyle's shop is project development. And they're here, but the other stuff was part of an existing fence and not part of the project. This Building 20 or Building 85.
So you had fencing along Discovery Drive, and then Discovery Drive was rerouted, and fencing was put in at that point in time that was back off the property line and it was galvanized. Security upgraded that and put that within like 1 foot off the property line as part of a replaced improvement. But I can't speak to whether or not they came from the town. Steve, were you involved with that at all?
I can address it. I work with Mike Whitney, who's one of the heads of security over there, and with Kevin Hitchcock from the town. So the fact it was security driven, and again, I know you may look at it today and think it's all brand new and was never there. That was sort of a non-aesthetic looking chain link fence, rusted out, barbed wire on it, and it could have been 2 feet off property line or 20 feet off property line. So what Regeneron wanted to do was to secure their property line. So having it 20 feet in really made no sense. So really the project that was with Kevin Hitchcock was just moving it out and upgrading it to a black vinyl chain link versus the My understanding, there was zero new fence put up there, it was just relocated from, again, it could have been 2 foot off property line, it could have been 20 foot off property line, but very unsightly versus what's out there today, you know, it is closer to the road today.
You know, when I drive by, I understand the hidden, I didn't realize there was so much of it already up in front of all the, other buildings that were there. And again, so I think it's not as intrusive as I thought it was going to be. My only concern is that I'm sure, you know, we jam around with the landscape, theme, maybe we can do something, I don't know now, but it's only a foot from the property line, whether we can bring some of that landscaping towards the road rather than behind the fence. I don't know if that's a possibility.
There was one section where the bushes were behind, just beyond there going towards, Red Mill. The bushes were behind and some nice trees, and that looked really nice.
So where this is proposed, is we, if it's proposed a foot from the property line, so maybe we can, and I'm just suggesting, unless we can get some landscaping, because I think we have some landscaping behind it. If there's a way we can reverse it, or maybe do it on both sides, or alternate area of the bush, or something like that. But honestly, the way it looks, and with your security issues, you know, I think you almost have to continue with what you have. But maybe we can do something to kind of dress this one building up a little bit, maybe with some creative landscaping, whether we bring the fence in a little bit, and possibly put some, landscaping in front so it's visible from the road a little better, or maybe it will be visible with just the fence. I really haven't looked to see.
You don't have as much room there either. You get more property from that fence in, so you can see through it. Black coated is great.
One of the other questions I brought up about the doors and about there's no entrance way on the front there, you do have windows that are there, so I understand that, you know, we want that to be, you know, that is a point of entry possible. So, you know, a first thought I had 2 weeks ago, I realized that, you do need the security.
So a couple things to consider. The 1 foot from the property line is driven by our legal. They don't want liability of people coming onto our property, and potentially getting hurt and creating liability. Security just wants to be able to keep people out, whether that's 10 feet in or 20 feet in, or just securing the actual assets, if you will. We're not intending to put barbed wire fence around the full perimeter of Temple Lane. That would be a huge undertaking. So we are predominantly there protecting just the buildings. So we had fencing up ever since I started 21 years ago, but it has been the galvanized, rusted out, sometimes hit with the snow plow, bent over, looking, haphazard. And we've upgraded. I do think the black vinyl, as far as chain link barbed wire fences go, I think black vinyl is probably the best look you're going to get. Moving to a different type of design is not something that my boss is willing to entertain at this point. So that's my directive. So while we're coming back and asking for changes, that's happened since being driven predominantly by our COVID-19 pursuits.
Put any of that landscape, Kyle, or Dave, be moved up front, or is that almost?
Bushes might suffer a little, being so close to the curb, if you put them in front of the fence.
I think salt on the road is probably going to mess that up.
So, we had that argument with Tyler at Subway. I got through that.
Might hinder security a little bit as well, if you had shrubberies in front of the fence versus.
So we have trees in front of the fence on certain parts of the property now. 15 feet easement is all we have to the road. So moving anything outside between the fence and the road, as long as the town's comfortable with that, depending on the shrubs you provided, landscape drawings so that we can identify what type of shrubs to put there that would not crowd the road, but that would be the question on how much of the easement.
Well, Jim, when I went by, because it's 6 foot, it's black coated, you almost look through it, and I think that's the intent of the black coating.
Yeah, it's
So I
basically
like
the
your-
best bad idea.
Yeah, so I like the landscaping behind the fence when I drove by, because I drove by twice, I went back and forth. And to me, it was like, okay, I can see through it, the lawns are right. You do a nice job. It looks great.
I mean, as far as planting, I don't think you're gonna get back in the town road, right? So I don't think that's gonna be an issue.
There are street trees, everywhere, so I think we can pick species that make sense. If landscape screening is, something that must be done.
Will security entertain landscaping? Where I come from, the characteristically quiet. We have fences, guards, barbed wire, and guards with automatic rifles. So this is, but, would they allow, some type of shrubbery near that fencing?
We have a lot of shrubbery inside the fencing now, and I believe we're currently at shrubs inside the fencing as well. We do want to use the shrubs as a screen for people driving down the roads. We don't want people stopping and looking through our fence into the windows of the building. So yeah, shrubs are fine. If we put stuff on the outside of the fence, my guess is you're gonna want us to maintain those, and trim them back, and if they start to grow on the road, we can do things with them. I'm okay with that, but I don't know that there's, how much, 15 feet of grass between there and the road, is there any, there's no ditch or anything there, is there?
No, there's no ditch.
It's all flat, so we could take,
I would-
trees or something to put there.
I was wearing my Fitbit, I got 7,000 steps in walking around campus.
You didn't get all the way around it though, did you?
Yeah, I think if you guys would entertain some kind of enhanced landscaping. that would be helpful.
On the outside of the fence.
That is what it is. Okay.
I mean, we are intending to put it on the inside of the fence.
Inside of the fence.
Sure,
I
inside.
vote for inside.
I vote for inside, but that's something I'll be flexible where I can, that's where
You've been here many times, you know you're not a voting member.
I am aware I'm not a voting member.
I'm guessing we currently have these shrubberies or trees, a mix of deciduous and evergreen trees 30 foot on center, because that's what the type 1 or type 4 landscape calls for. So that's what you see there, where you see the larger units, and then the shrubberies are probably 5 foot on center, and then we've got the nice landscape boulders there as well.
Is that what's planned to go there once construction?
That is correct, yeah. And honestly, and I think Nancy hit it, I mean, the landscaping around there is beautiful, and you got a great crew to maintain stuff, and I think that helps as well. But I did the same thing after our last meeting. The next day I drove down there, just like, if you're driving 15, 20 miles an hour, you see right through the black chain link fence, and all you see is a nice landscape behind it. This would mimic sort of what you see. We had the B85 parking lot addition 5 years ago, and it's pretty heavily landscaped inside there, so. So you see here, these are 30 foot on center. If you felt that we needed to space something a little tighter, or if you're saying inside or outside, it sounds as if it would be agreeable with that.
You know what species those trees are, and how big the canopy?
I couldn't tell you. I would tell you they're not, 40 foot tall maples that are going to end up growing in there,
Our facilities folks prefers Alberta spruce. We put in a lot of arborvitae, they don't do all the net soil, so they tend to rip those out after the fact and replace those with spruce.
So that's all evergreen.
I drove around there last week. Everything I saw as far as fence goes is barbed wire. In the area that isn't barbed wire.
Across the street for the parking garage is a barbed wire.
That's probably 200 linear feet.
But that's protecting the parking garage, not protecting the manufacturing building.
But most of the campus itself is barbed wire.
So everything, I get a little confused, everything is barbed wire?
Everything surrounding the campus that contains their manufacturing building is barbed wire.
Except for the span from the.
There's a little, you have the black coated.
So that used to be, chain link, I believe, with barbed wire that we took down for construction purposes.
Yeah, there is a section of actual, like, permanent fence.
Are there other, maybe looking at this a different way, are there other spots along Discovery Drive or on the Regeneron property that maybe you guys could sort of do this for that? Right? This this is not something totally desirable here, but we get something else on the same property off this particular location. I don't have the answer to that, but that's one way to look at it.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of the landscaping discussion.
I don't know.
They're gonna do-
the answer.
I mean, I think given the COVID situation with security tightening it as much as it is, I have no issues allowing what they propose. And, I think if there's another project that comes up in this area, maybe we could be a little bit more creative at that time. But, if you look at what's there, 90% of it's already up. And, so I wouldn't have a problem. And as far as the trade-off, and I'm sure we'll beat them up on something.
No, Ralph.
You don't know? Well,
Hey, guy, are you gonna be doing the beating?
no, that's just my, it's, I was disappointed at first when I heard the barbed wire in the fence. When I went and looked at it, it wasn't as bad as I thought.
Yeah, I think at one point, I wasn't running the gym, but I noticed the barbed wire stopped, and you didn't see it, so it's not as noticeable as.
Right,
I think it's a little bouldered up, you got a lot of rocks.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's all more too.
Well, you told them about the place in Ghent, and all of a sudden they just.
I don't know where they don't come from there, they're pretty ones.
What do you have on the inside, side of the fence to work with for additional landscaping? It looks like you got a sidewalk and then just maybe a grass strip.
It's probably got an 8-foot area there, Jim, between the stone mulch against the building and then the walkway. You've got probably about an 8-foot area there of landscape. Typically, I think finished off in mulch, with minimal grass in those areas. All well maintained.
And the length lower on the trees, I don't have to, I don't like that. Rotate the fence a little bit,
I got a new employee.
I agree with Ralph, I have no problems with it.
So I mean, the intent tonight was just discussion, we don't actually have.
I thought you wanted to put this to rest, right?
Well, if we can, I'd prefer to, but if we need to come back and vote on it at a different time, we'll do it.
You become soft.
Yeah, I used to be much worse.
So, if you could just describe from the street curb and the curb, is that, you have a grassed area where the trees are?
If you got a curb, sounds like 15 foot, I would guess 12 to 15 foot of grass area.
Yeah.
That I assume the town maintains, it's town right away, and then the fence, and then we would have about an 8-foot heavily landscaped area there per town code, and then a paved trail, and then stone mulch up against the building area.
And is, between the spruce, you say there's some undergrowth?
Shrubberies, I believe 5 foot on center, and the trees are 30 foot on center.
What are those shrubs?
You don't know.
We had a separate landscape plan that was part of the type 4 use that we don't have memorized right now.
Right, that was presented to the town with the original.
So I know you two are, voting on it, but.
Is there a shrubbery or a tree or something that you would prefer,
I don't
something
know.
denser? Or
I don't know plant species well enough, but, yeah, I think
So, I mean, I think potentially the discussion over the plantings, because we have a conditional approval based on satisfying outstanding technical details. So that's maybe something we can work through over the next few weeks, with the dialogue.
so how does that fence terminate once you get to the driveway that comes around?
That's correct. Comes over here to the driving and comes over because there's a gate here. There's one of their loading docks and then back out. And this you'll see is a very nicely landscaped area that was protecting the parking lot over there. And honestly, that would be the same type 1 or type 4 landscape that we had, that we were showing out here.
Well, you'd be putting the fence in before the bushes, right? So maybe we could just work with the fence issue and have the condition that they fully define the trees. I mean, I think in that particular location, I do like spruce a lot, it's good for the birds, the habitat and everything. And that particular building isn't as handsome as your other one, so it would be fenced and it'll kind of cover it. It's not that I hate it, but it's just, to me, it's, look at where the other ones are set back and they have a little more character to them, the other buildings. So I think the spruce would look well there.
So that building your project? Okay.
Well, that side of the building was the worst vantage point of anything that Regeneron that before that building was built.
Yeah.
The base of building 85 all along Discovery Drive was pretty beat up, so
Yeah.
having a nice new building there, I think improves it.
You also have space.
It's so close to the
That's where we got
road,
space.
it's space.
So I mean, if you're running out.
We are at that site, there's a number of, there's several acres of wooded property that are potentially developable, but, our executive vice president would rather fire than cut down trees, so I haven't made that suggestion yet.
So your retirement health.
Got a few more years.
So, I'm just taking a look at outdoors.
I don't remember, or I don't know what the planting plan is, but that was already part of the site plan approval.
Yeah.
If you want to revisit that, and have us modify that because you're approving the fence, we can come back and show you what that is, what has already been approved, and take comments on the plantings if you prefer to do that before voting on it.
I'm just, I think I can, at least for my own comfort, assess it pretty quickly. So, just, they're not dwarf, are they?
I believe that they are.
They are, so like, I'm just reading online, they're about to be 12 feet in height, and a very slow growing, 2 to 4 inches a year. What's not clear to me is how wide they get at the base. I'm wondering if tightening up the tree spacing might be a good thing.
What the attorney just texted me. He said, resolution read, will be subject to outstanding technical details, including enhanced landscaping, an enhanced landscaping plan subject to approval of the planning board chairman and the planning and zoning department.
So basically, you're okay, the board's, if you're agree to that, you're okay with the fence, it's just a matter of showing you more detailed landscape plan. Enhancing perhaps what you have already.
Yeah. So, Christie, you can.
Yeah, you know, I wasn't here at the meeting last time, so I missed that discussion, and unfortunately, by the time I read the meeting minutes, I didn't have time to drive by, so I'm going a little blind here. I guess when I read the meeting minutes, I was wondering in my head if there were any other options besides the barbed wire, because I'm familiar with some other, you know, big global companies in the area and how they do their fencing that doesn't use barbed wire, but other methods to keep people out. But I wasn't aware that there was already barbed wire, you know, in a lot of it.
Yeah.
So,
So I guess my initial, when I first heard this, I had a very negative approach to it, because I didn't think there was barbed wire anywhere. It is, fence along Discovery Drive is probably 90% barbed wire, and this is, I don't know how many, 200 linear feet, something like that.
How long is it?
360.
360.
I'm happy to discuss this.
so to try to do something else for that small.
Yeah, it would be a small section. And it is, you know, razor wire would be all spooled up, but it's not that. It's really, really thin line.
Yeah, I was thinking there's a way also.
Good.
All right. Let's go off easy, guys. Now I'll make a motion that the county planning board hereby classifies its actions as type 2 which involves construction of a non-residential facility less than 4,000 square feet of floor area, consistent with zoning and local land use, under secret and chapter 6, part 617.5 C9, code rules and regulations of the state of New York, approve the site plan modification prepared by Steve Art, PE, dated July 28, 2020, subject to the following conditions: satisfying outstanding technical details as determined by the town, planning and zoning department, including an enhanced landscape plan subject to approval by the planning board chairman and the planning board, planning and zoning department. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Pan.
Roll call, Ms. Walsh, Chairman Master,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Viola,
Yes.
Ms. Kupiec, yes, Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Ms. Warren, yes, Mr. Canton,
Yes.
motion carried by 7-0 vote.
We have budgeted from the landscape contractor, and we can certainly work with them on the species and density of planting.
They would know the spacing as well, so I can't say maybe it should be.
I'd stay across the line that you have and discuss species and if you want to change that.
You guys just got approved, I'm gonna take yourself a hole here, like,
Would you want us to bring the plan that has this back to you guys and have you comment on it, or would you like us to take a stab at enhancing it ourselves and present that?
Yeah, we don't wanna do the design for you, so take a stab at it.
Okay, and would that be on the next meeting's agenda?
We can do it over email.
Okay.
I think they're saying that planning and zoning is good and then Matt's good, that we're okay, so I would say on our end, we'll modify the plan based on the landscape contractor.
So, yeah, you guys distribute it to planning and zoning department, we'll distribute it to the board. See if anyone's got comments.
I just wanted to make sure I understood what we need to meet the conditions.
It won't be a meeting, it'll be verbal, and, you know, I'm gonna have to stamp the plan back. Okay, once everyone's in agreement, I'll stamp it, and we can go.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, move on to 1719A, 580 Clinton Turnpike, Town Center, minor PDD amendment. And 2017, you come back for more, huh? Perfect. That all came, you know, I printed out 7 for a reason. Yeah, what it goes.
So Tyler's handing out some documents, and I think you may have gotten, if you had some emails earlier today on that, but in essence, there's really 2 things that you're looking at as far as the town center project, and what we have here is the overall plan that was approved. Primarily, the focus that we're looking at now is the front areas in here, buildings A, B, and on this plan, it was discussed as a future commercial pad. So there's a couple things based on that future commercial pad, and here's a blow-up of what that is.
You turn that the other way so we can see kind of. Just turn it down.
Upside down.
There you go. Thank you. Does that screw you up? Sorry about
Oh,
that.
it doesn't screw me up.
You can read that.
So,
We can just move over a little bit.
so in essence, basically, we've got the front of the site that was buildings A, B, and what we call the future commercial pad. One of the modifications we're doing is we want to bring the future commercial pad into phase 1. There was so much work that we were doing along the roadway, sidewalks. We're now looking at sharing some of the drainage systems between the 2 parcels, that we felt that it made sense to bring this building in as part of phase 1. So that was one of the modifications we were making to the site plan. And the other modification, this was approved, and it's noted in some of the tables that you have there, of all commercial building. I think it had a footprint of about 9,000 square foot, and it always read in the document that it was going to be a maximum of 25,000 square foot. And the intent is now to make it, to match what we're doing here, make it first floor commercial and a maximum of 24 apartments up above. The number of apartments is not changing. It was 275 units, and that's all it's going to be. But in essence, we're taking some of the apartments from the back of the site and and want to put them up here in a multi-story building that will more align with the commercial building up here. So, in essence, the phasing's changing because we're trying to bring this building in as part of phase one, and then also, what was classified, I guess, or we're considering as a minor PDD amendment. We have been working with Adam and the town attorneys and the applicant's attorney, just for clarification on that. I think you may have a letter from Kevin Hitchcock. Basically, if the changes to the PDD were considered to be minor enough, that could be classified as a minor amendment. My understanding is that can then be dealt with the planning board. You don't need to go back to the town board. You don't need to hold a public hearing. In essence,
You have a major amendment to PDD and back to the town board. And minor planning board approval as determined by the code board.
correct. So basically, we had worked back and forth a little bit, and Kevin wrote a letter, I think, about a week or so ago. And in essence, what we tried doing as part of that is just comparing all the impacts. What did the PDD have as far as traffic, water, sewer, schools, et cetera, and then basically highlighted what this plan would have. In essence, the 275 units never changed. It's still 275 units, but a potential of 25,000 square foot of commercial that has been reduced to like 9,500 square foot. So in essence, less traffic, less water, less sewer, things of that nature. And that's what we tried to have a comparison in that side-by-side table that we have there.
Steve, one of the positives that this whole project had was the two structures you had right along 9 and 20. Brought up to the front like we had hoped to see, right across a nice boulevard. And your proposal now, this koi pond is really a problem for me.
Okay.
I have a problem with, swift ponds visible to the public when they drive by, and now you've got it right on 9 and 20. So I know you reduced the size of the building to accommodate the pond, and I really think it's gonna be a detriment to the project the way I perceive.
If it was a nicely landscaped pond or dry pond with infiltration like a bio retention area, would that make a difference? Or
I've never seen one yet that I've liked.
Okay.
To be honest with you, I just, it's just my opinion. And I don't know if that's the reason why we shrunk it, because you had problems trying to find where to put the water. I don't know, but it just seems that to me, it's a shame to put it right there in the entranceway of this.
So to answer that, there's kind of a couple answers. So yes, it's the lowest portion of the site on that side of the street, but we also wanted to put the sign on that side of the street as well. So to have the building plugged up right against the sign on the Columbia Turnpike side, that was what we were trying to avoid. We looked at a few different concepts. We're taking advantage of infiltration and subsurface stormwater management practices within the parking lot of that building now. But I think we still, to meet the quantity of water that we have from the site, we still need some above ground retention as well.
Will this pond require a fence around it?
No, typically you do if you're retaining water in it, but this is more of a bio-retention area, so the idea is during a rainfall event, it may pond up to about a foot, but then it infiltrates into the ground after that.
I think that would be more attractive than typical.
Yeah, I mean,
In a subdivision when it's got a black fence around it, I agree.
but even in this type of pond, correct me if I'm wrong, you're still gonna have a stand pipe, you're still gonna see a concrete pipe where for the overflow, it's still gonna be visible. I just think it's a waste. You're talking, maybe a third of that parcel on the right side is now gonna become a pond rather than, a nice building fulfilling a whole strip, a boulevard that they call it, to Melbourne, not Mount Vernon anymore, I don't know what they call that. The motel.
Everything does then.
Yeah, so some of the size of that building, Ralph, is also minimized due to the amount of parking that was there as well. So because we had a bigger footprint, then we actually took the building and centered it and just had green space right and left. So it didn't have the pond, but so we probably would have a difficult time making that. Let's see, this is that front building, that,
It's like 140 feet in width, I want to say, and 70 change in depth.
so this was 12,000 square feet here, and this is about, just say 9,000, so 25% less. If we made this as big as this building here, and then also as important, I think, is a multi-story, so the buildings look symmetric, we wouldn't have enough parking in this parking lot area, so. So the size of that building was partly parking area as well.
We can't really make the footprint too much bigger than what's shown on building F. If you said, hey, I'd rather see it centered than pushed more so to the west side of the site, I guess that's something we could look at. I think, aesthetics and landscaping is as important to us as it is to you, in the sense of, we don't want the site to look poorly and present itself poorly in any way, because that's what our customers are looking first. So I guess that's the only mitigating effort to say we want to make it look as nice as possible.
How does soil sampling?
Well, it's really overburdened, so it's a little more porous up top as it gets down below, and then all of a sudden it turns back into sand at a certain depth. So we would still need to dig some holes in that area just to confirm what's down in there. So
That's just like the fourth thing.
that's correct.
We had geotech out there, they probably did fall test pits too.
We all thought it would be like the sand and gravel pit, which is 300 feet back, where you got 20 and 30 foot sand. But I don't know if this site maybe was built in over time or what it was, but a little bit more dense up front.
Is it just logistics that you can't take this and put it right in the center?
From a grading standpoint, yes, but your point's well taken, Ralph, and we'll give some thought to it, and see where it can go. But yeah, from an elevation standpoint, the bottom of this pond is probably 5 to 6 foot lower than this side here. So this all drains back to front. We're trying to capture as much of the parking lot to get it to drain into an underground stormwater system here, and basically this was being used to handle the building. So this here was coming over into that pond, and a little bit of the parking lot area.
How about to the right side near the building?
Over here,
Yeah.
just a smaller area, Chris, and at one point we had this centered, and we're looking at smaller pockets on either side, and maybe an idea like that might work, and that would not as obnoxious in a large area, And I think as well, what I'd like to do is present some photographs of a well-maintained, and I get it, well-maintained versus not maintained. And to Tyler's point, though, if you have something ugly in front of these properties, you will have a maintenance staff out on this site. It's not like once every month someone's gonna come take a look at it, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I guess the problem is, if this thing is, this will be around for a long time. And they're also going, well, Tyler, it's in his best interest, he's well maintained, all confidence in the world to do that. They get sold in 15 years. We won't run out of
Yeah, I think that's fair. So let's look at a few different avenues of like centering the building more so, potentially putting it on the western side, and then also if those options aren't feasible, how we can beautify it better to do it on the eastern side.
So, sorry, Chris.
I was just trying to recall, did we also say that for both of building A and F, we were going to have some kind of capacity for outdoor seating in the front of the building?
So for building A, we always talked about it having over here with the potential of getting a restaurant here. So we do have some outdoor seating here, but I think the classification on the future building was a maximum of 25,000 square feet. I don't know if there's many.
Yeah, as part of the original PDD, I don't think it was specifically called out as outdoor seating. I don't even know if building A had specifically called out outdoor seating. I think it showed a patio, but I think
I thought we showed a patio on that west side.
Yeah.
Which would kind of be looking at the pond, and sometimes there's an odor associated with the pond too, which would be prohibited.
Yeah, because we talked about gates and fence and different aspects.
Well, restaurants are clamoring for outdoor seating now, so, far up with what's going on now, the trending. But I was gonna bring the same thing we did at the pond, we go to the right of the building on the west side.
On the opposite side over here.
Yeah, you might be able to recognize that way and have a over.
such that it's, golf course quality, landscape feature, or something you may see it to be extreme about it at Disney, that level of attractiveness.
With the fountain.
Well, not, I was thinking about that type of planting.
Have you considered using
boulders?
No, I do think beautifying it like that would be beneficial, and having a fountain, I think, actually adds to the aesthetics of it. I think the challenge just becomes, from DEC's perspective, if it's not meant to retain water, then.
I'm not saying not necessarily, but something that's very purposefully designed. A lot of these bio retention areas aren't very appealing as some of them are, especially when they're carefully thought out and well maintained.
So we'll ask the landscape architect that question as well and see.
I'm sure there's examples out there, well-designed, will help you out in your return business.
We had a real problem with geese on the plaza on the corner of 40, 44. There's actual ponds.
They
Yeah.
actually stop traffic.
They do.
Right across 43 and the other, yeah.
It's all over the parking lot.
It's a really.
It's terrible.
That intersection back.
It's hard not to get the winter storm.
I'm surprised, a lot of hunters on that road too.
So the intent tonight is just to schedule a public hearing, well, for the presentation and then schedule a public hearing. So, we have positive feedback. Anyone else?
Just to be clear, is the intent to schedule a public hearing? Or do we?
Joe, do we have to have a public hearing? He says, Joe spoke.
I wasn't sure if it was also to update the schedule.
For the minor PDD amendment, we have a public hearing.
Yeah. The site plan will take care of it. That doesn't require.
Yeah, look at section 2.912 of the zoning law, under minor amendment, it says a minor amendment may be approved by the planning board subsequent to a public hearing.
Agreed on that, but I thought it was also to set the schedule.
The town board is, they would accept the sketch plan. So if this board would act, we would recommend that the town board.
It's a major site plan.
Understood.
Are we at time as well, aside from the minor amendment, that we want more of a public hearing? I know we had a fair amount last time between planning board and town board for the whole project. Is the sense that phase one is gonna have a public hearing aside from minor PDD amendment? And I guess I'm only asking because we're gonna schedule a public hearing. Should we be trying to solicit other comment on the project as well? I don't know, maybe, are we premature at this point? I don't know, but I'm.
Wait, say that again? The site plan is required.
Okay, so if we have this public hearing for the minor site plan amendment, that may be the last plan, public hearing we have, or?
On phase one as far as I know, right?
I think, I mean, the town board's practice has been to schedule public hearings on major site plans. So,
But
I would expect at least one at the town board level.
Yeah, not again.
We're gonna make we're gonna do a public hearing on the PDD amendment. We'll then make a recommendation on the site plan. That's all right.
Yes.
Joe spoke.
The resolution would be to approve the minor amendment, recommend that the town board reaffirm the neg deck issued as part of the PDD, and then recommend approval of the major site plan.
Got that?
Understood, but do we do all those steps until we have the updated site plan? Go back to the town board until we have the updated approved site plan?
We're talking about two different,
Yeah, two different
we're
paths.
talking about, phase one site plan, and we're talking about a minor amendment for this other phase, which isn't gonna be built until way down the road, right?
No, this is, this is a minor amendment to the entire project, right?
Correct.
It's just the site plan they're gonna come in for will be for phase one. So you're saying you don't wanna have a public hearing tonight? I would just assume we have a
I'm fine getting it over with, I'm just curious about the process beyond.
I thought the amendment was to include building F in phase one.
But it's included the.
So it's also a site plan amendment as well,
But the public hearing is strictly
for the PDD amendment.
yeah, we can talk over the next few weeks. If we are looking at just a recommendation to go to town board in 2 weeks, people are comfortable with that. We just don't have to take action on it today.
Well, and we've still got, the review, the TDE and technical review is, it,
I haven't even really started.
yeah, we haven't even started. We're really at the very beginning of this process.
I think we're saying we're having a public hearing on the PDD amendment, but not really adding anything on site plan, because we're
And we
months
could-
down the road.
I don't see the difference between accepting the sketch plan today or accepting one. Procedural, it's not gonna make any difference.
Correct.
You get that?
So are we
Can't see your
scheduling?
action.
Are we scheduling public hearing for 2 weeks from now? Are we coming back 2 weeks from now, I guess, the 9th?
Well, what if the planning board isn't happy with the proposal?
That's complete, that's a separate issue.
I think that's a site plan action rather than a PDD.
The site plan, but the layout here is not necessarily what I think the site plan,
Review.
that can be, where you were about that.
No, not yet, that was my second comment. I was gonna get through this one
Let's
first.
swing over to.
He does have the dumpsters already.
One time and night out. You don't get two.
On the minor amendment should be held before, obviously, the planning board votes on it, so if there are unhappy members of the planning board, they can certainly vote no after the public hearing, but the public hearing has to occur first.
Correct.
But I don't think the issue is with the amendment.
Right, ultimately, for the amendment, though, the amendment is just for this building to go into phase one. So certainly, people have the, are people okay with the public hearing on the next, for the PDD amendment? Is anyone opposed to it?
I guess I just want to clear that we have to have a public hearing for the amendment only, so you don't have to have a public hearing.
No, just for the amendment, site plan, so we don't approve the site plan. We make a recommendation on the site plan to the town board. They'll have a public hearing.
Planning board public hearings on site plans are discretionary.
And just so I'm clear, Steve, on this, the building reduction in commercial space is how much?
Yeah, we had, a maximum 25,000 square feet, and we're down to 9,000, because in essence, the 9,500, the intent is to have it all on a single story on the lower level. It wasn't ever gonna be a 25,000 square foot building, it was a thought, okay, maybe we could have maybe some corporate office would wanna come move here and build a 3-story, 25,000 square foot building.
And Steve, you said that the water load and sewer load would be less with the residents versus a commercial?
That's correct, because the number of residents, Kurt, stay the same. It was always 275, and that's all we have. So in essence, in theory, could have been 16,000 square foot less of commercial space.
Okay.
Water's down, sewer's down, traffic's down,
Okay.
amount of parking required, et cetera.
I do like the idea of buildings along all the 920 space being built out.
Yeah, that's really what the point of all this was, symmetrical then, and then you don't have this gaping hole next door to it that looks like a misfit, and by the time you do all the site work, it's all in front of things.
All right.
Donna has a question.
Steve, are you only gonna leave, one retention pond here, and more than one?
So we're gonna have some underground detention in different bio areas. So this similar bio retention area here, we're looking at one over here. We're looking at some stormwater planters here, not shown, but we've got an underground detention chamber system here and an underground detention chamber system over here. So in theory, there's like 5 different practices that'll be.
Just the one above ground.
This one here?
Yeah, that'd be the only one.
This is gonna be similar to what that would be
All right.
over here, yes.
Okay.
Sound good? Now I'll make a motion to schedule a public hearing. The public hearing is hereby scheduled for September 9th, 2023, East Greenbush, Red Barn, 7 PM, Town Center minor PDD amendment. Other appropriate means, or other remote means will be offered for residents to participate. Joe, does that sound good?
Check, Adam's going again, it was to be scheduled at the Red Barn, another appropriate facility, or by electronic means.
Scheduled at the Red Barn or other appropriate facility or by remote means. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Horn. Gotcha.
Roll call as follows. Chairman Masterson.
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Viola.
Yes.
Mr. Diak. Yes. Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Ms. Horn. Yes. Mr. Gannon.
Yes.
Motion carried by 7-0 vote.
See you on the 9th.
Thank you.
Next, we move on to 2016 Collins Homeland LLC, 44 Troy Road for site plan.
I'm there for them, so I'll get that from another time. What's that? Yeah.
Bring one next time.
Sure. Yeah. Because the easel has left, anybody mind if I use this chair? Isn't that from too?
Wonderful.
We'll do that on October. You're looking for a site plan modification at 44 Troy Road.
Thanks.
Wonderful, thank you.
Ingenuity is best.
Geometry. Do you mind stepping up a little bit more so the camera can catch you?
Absolutely.
That's good. That's good. Thank you.
44 is close to 9.
I'm sorry.
Just, this is closer to 9 44 Troy Road.
Correct, yeah. Closer to 9 and 20 than it's going to be, so. Any introductions, or would the board like me to just get into it?
Jump right in.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Members of the board, my name is Brian Sibberly with Verity Engineering. We are representing the owner of 44 Troy Road, which is the applicant and the tenant. Mr. Collins is here with me this evening behind me, and he's also the owner of ITG Corporation. What we have in front of the board here is a small project. It is in essence, a driveway rehabilitation project. We have received an area variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals. As you see here, we are proposing 3 spaces or just parking in the front yard in the PPP zone. Just to refresh the board of where we are, again, 44 Troy Road. We are going to be on the east side of the road. The abutters around us are generally all single-family use. The zone is the PPB, and again, we talked about the occupancy of ITG. The property itself is about 0.8 acres. We've got about 100 feet of frontage along Route 4. Topography of the site gently slopes easterly, so from the roadway down east. The site is principally developed today with a single-story structure that used to be a house that has been converted to a business. From a topography perspective, where the entrances on the Route 4 side are generally at grade, this parking lot exists today, and it is generally a walkout type of basement around that side. The site itself has no wetlands or water bodies or water courses. It's important to kind of note in the area of the project interest here. We are not in the 100-year floodplain, although the property does clip potentially the floodplain in the rear where there's no development proposed. There are are no utility changes proposed with this. The site is served with municipal sewer and water. Private utilities are at the right of way. Again, this is not a site plan approval, a proposal for new utility connections. And generally, we talked about topo, so the site generally drains for your eye here, being left to right or from west to east. Again, the proposal in front of the board, Mr. Collins approached the town of East Greenbush at its inception, and I know you all have an existing conditions plan that might make it a little bit easier to see what the existing conditions are, but if I just kind of narrate for the board today, on the south side of the property, we have a curb cut. We've got another curb cut that generally forms a half-moon circular type driveway that was an existing condition. And we have a third curb cut going north, which led to the driveway to the rear parking lot. As a result of these improvements and our knowledge of DOT highway design standards, what the proposal here is to close these two curb cuts and make the northernmost curb cut the principal access and revise the geometry to conform to the DOT highway design standards. Generally speaking, most of the improvements are going on here. This parking lot exists in its form today, and the proposal is to add one space in the rear, okay? You'll see that there's a proposed retaining wall here, and that'll be constructed to make up the grade. I know there was a comment from planning regarding the height of the wall. I just want to let the board know at its highest would be about 6 feet, okay? So again, it's a driveway rehabilitation project that really involves the closure of two curb cuts, the creation of a new principal access driveway, creation of 3 parking spaces in the front yard, which the applicant received a variance for already, some general regrading going on here. We're generally proposing not to cut anything. Okay, this is going to be filled with sub-base and pavement, and no new utility.
I think we had planning board made a positive recommendation to the zoning board relative to planning aspect, of course. Chris did that before. This sounds like a small wooden sign, I think, in front, and then you go downtown and back park.
That is correct. So what you're referring to today is the principal driveway that generally goes down on the north side of the house to the existing parking lot.
A little bit north of the Greenbush Inn or the our
So it's across the Old Troy Road.
That's a great, Gio, thank you, great reference. So,
Is the sign gonna move, or where does the sign exist on that?
the sign exists, generally speaking, right out here, and there's no proposed change to the signage. So really, just think about it from a planning perspective as we're creating 3 new parking spaces, closing off some kind of more dangerous multi curb cuts within 100 feet here, and reconstructing this one and adding a space down to the rear.
I don't know why, maybe Chris, I didn't understand this. I thought that the reconfiguration was to provide the handicap parking in the front.
Yeah, that was my understanding too.
So there's correct, there's been some chronology on this project. I think the plan that the planning board got a chance to see in its early phase was one where we generally had an autonomous parking lot with 6 spaces in the front. Those parking spaces were going to orient in the east-west direction, and behind those spaces we'd have 24 feet of pavement for cars to make maneuvers. In that type of situation, in the grading that we were going to do, which clearly the zoning board did not like the impact to this area that we were presenting, we revised the plan. To your point about the handicap now, we're going to, for less than 25 spaces, require 1, and we're going to put it in the back, as that's where the easiest access would be today, and we don't have to worry about a second one. And
Well, easiest for you, but is the primary entrance to this business in the front, because you're not supposed to make a handicapped person travel further than anyone else to get into the.
yeah, correct, right? And we're supposed to make reasonable accommodations. The owner is not making building-related changes that would kick off compliance to that. Our feeling on the law is that that space and where the client would bring people in that grade down there is where they're making
In
accommodations.
the back, because I would never go back to the property. I was wondering if it's a walk
Well, there's no building renovation being proposed.
I was just curious,
We're not-
because
Oh, yeah, no,
I thought I'd see it in the front, and it would make a difference on the.
It'd be a difference if we were doing building renovations over a certain threshold. A lot of other things would be relevant at that point, but we're, from our understanding, we're far away from that.
It makes sense, that's.
And what's the current use of the building? What's going to be, what's it going to be used for?
Great question. The building will continue to be used, in perpetuity for short-term purpose, in terms of what it is today. So it's the home of ITG Corporation. Mr. Collins owns that business. It's an IT consulting type business. Correct me if I'm doing anything wrong here. He's operated and run this business out of this location for 3 years, possibly? Close to 3. Close to 3 years. And I think the board should kind of generally view this as a capital improvement to the site. He wants to kind of improve what's there, take out this gravel thing he's got in the front. And ultimately speaking, I think the work shown on the plan was more than the applicant wanted to do, right? You don't know you're on a state highway and you have other hands in the cookie jar when you go to do something. So I think it started off as a repaving job. It's kind of morphed into doing the right things in front and generally speaking, providing some nice flare improvements.
Some of those businesses look really nice, I mean, it's really improving.
Got guys like this that want to, put money into the property and make it look nice from the streetscape. Right?
So is the park?
So, we talked about that, that this was really an opportunity that we're setting some precedent with the variance to be able to put parking in the front of the building, that exception. I don't think substantially change the character of the neighborhood, but the opportunity to do really nice landscaping and set that precedent for other potential businesses. I mean, I could see some of those other little homes around along up for turning into businesses someday that, when I looked at the plan closely, this revised plan now, the landscaping itself didn't wow me. I saw it was used and I'm trying to think of what else was there.
Service berries, lindens, wheat fire, but I think what I'm hearing generally is you like the landscaping plan on the first plan that you saw.
Well, there wasn't much on the first plan too, and I think that's what we talked about, that we'd have to, because there were some screening requirements that weren't on the first plan, that now that the configuration has changed, I'm not sure what the screening requirements would be now with the parking going the other direction.
I'm seeing, looking at the same thing, and I don't know that I have this correct, but it looks to me like the interior landscaping requirement would be type 3, and street frontage type 4 landscaping for the zoning law. And that would separate the PP, that are basically compatible uses on the sides and front.
In the PPB zone, and that's, to your point, that's something that we can look at, and do, as part of our review, more detailed analysis to support the board through that. I also want to note that in the PPB zone, the standards also allow the board to consider, modifications or additional landscaping, that might be needed. I forget what the language exactly is, to make it more compatible, realizing that you have a mix of different types of uses in this zone.
Yeah, there's a clause in the district language that says the planning board may require additional site planning or landscaping measures to reduce impacts on adjacent residences by normal business operations.
So, I mean, the intent is just to accept the sketch plan, so it's something we can look into over the next few weeks. I'm generally, personally, a fan of reducing the number of curb cuts and getting down to a single curb cut.
And Brian, if I remember correctly, it's less than 1,000 additional overall impervious, correct? That you're proposing, it's small.
Correct, very slow. So I guess as we morph through the proposals, right, at one point, the board had a referral from zoning originally, we had a much larger impact, more impervious. What we really have here is, I think the zoning board helped steer this project more towards what was called, we call this the residential turnout. So what you're gonna find up and down the street is most people have these little flag turnout areas so that they can generally orient their cars and come out onto the state highway facing the right way. And so I think the zoning board that just felt kind of more comfortable. And of course, what that does is less hardscape, there's less runoff, and we have a tight site, you can't really implement, we're not going to do certain stormwater practices here. So generally speaking, it's, I don't know the figures off my head, pretty close.
It's like 9
those guys, it's negligible. Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you right now, it's a couple things, right? The driveway is widening here. We've got to conform to DOT standards, so the entrance stroke is much wider than today. We're adding a space in the rear. But I'll bring that statistic of how much more impervious, but generally speaking, as little as possible to have what you see here. The other thing I want to note too, to the board, is that the first plan that we had presented was going to require a special use permit for parking greater than 10 spaces in the zone. So part of the amendment process and working with the zoning board was to, of course, and the applicant and his needs, was to generally pare back and present the 10 spaces.
Well, that was a question I had. Do you anticipate having customers coming to your home?
It's extremely rare. Yeah.
No, so it's
Extremely rare.
These spots are just
For
for your
employees.
employees?
I recall that from when you were here for years.
Because the only other comment I have with the handicap parking area, not spot, is that that's right where you're gonna push the snow. So, in the winter time. And of course, the handicap spot will be a snow pile there rather than a spot in the park.
Well, no, because I plow the driveway now. I can push that over the retaining wall, actually.
Yeah,
I can clear the entire back.
Okay.
We've got quite a bit of grade drop. There's actually, along the south and east area here, there's actually a double retaining wall. So there's quite a bit of grade drop, and so as Mr. Collins is mentioning, any kind of push off generally will do that and not form a pile there.
I like the apron being wider, I mean, because you can get car coming in and a car going out, so you're not gonna have somebody hitting somebody in the road, and for somebody to come out, so I like that.
Yeah, so, you brought up a great point. I think we liked the other, we did show the zoning board, we talked about what we called an amended original plan. So if this planning board saw a plan that had 6 spaces in the front yard, we thought about bringing back a plan that only had 3, where that parking, those 3 spaces would have had 24 feet behind them to make maneuvers. We felt, and DOT felt, that was safer because they could operate autonomously, so to speak. Although Blake at DOT generally said, I'm really okay with both. So DOT really didn't have a strong position on whether or not conflicts would exist here. But generally speaking, it actually is neck down. The standards call for 28-foot opening, which really would have appeared very, very wide here.
That's wide.
Blake actually shoved it back down to 24, and I'm glad he did. It just really looked awkward. So it really would have been wide. But to your point, it's at least 24 feet. A lot of maneuverability. We've got a wider radius coming in on the north side than we do leaving here. And to ask you, this driveway is canted only because of highway design standards. It's a 5-foot. The projection of this radius to the touchdown of Route 4 is a spec. Okay, we can't really hold it, but DOT is willing to accept that. We give it the best try we can. We've got 4.31 feet here, as you can see. But if you ask yourself, why are you canting the driveway in the last 30 feet, there's a reason for that. But ultimately speaking, yeah, if you're coming off northbound, you're going to have a lot more visibility. And clearly, if you're waiting in the southbound to cross the lane, you'll have a clear view of someone that's actually making a maneuver that you shouldn't.
Brian, you, talk 6 feet is a lot, and you, and Mike, you just mentioned about pushing the snow over that retaining wall. Is there a point where a guide rail or some kind of fence is required on the top of a drop like that?
It's more than 30 inches, isn't it?
5-inch drop.
Yeah, there's going to be, we're at the site level now. We wanted to talk about the sketch. There's absolutely going to be, if we need to have a split rail fence or a guide rail. Somebody mentioned the 30 inches. Yeah, we don't want to create any unsafe situations. The 5 or 6 feet will be making up the grade on where the wall is now. Generally speaking, there's more of a tiered section over there.
Excuse me, do you see with the additional impervious area and the pitch, any impact to water running off-site, the residents, other residents?
I think,
Great question. And the answer is no, because we generally don't what's going to sheet flow this way, already sheet flow, we're not proposing any grading. This driveway, we did throw some spot elevations on here so you can generally see. These spaces are gonna drain back to the driveway and back down and sheet flow like they were before. We've got an elevation gap and a retaining wall separating us from this property, so we're generally not going to, certainly we're gonna increase runoff when we add slightly more impervious, but it's not.
So I understand it's been a long process, but we appreciate your investment into, town.
So when would the landscaping design
I guess we would. I mean, is that something you can look into between now and the next meeting? Showing you the landscaping requirements of DPW. I think I have it in value, or you guys are gonna review it, right?
What do we propose to consider, just a sketch plan?
All we're doing today is, setting. Unless anyone.
So there'll be additional meetings.
Alright, then we'll see you guys back.
In my understanding, they have a section 239, which is a county referral. And I guess the question I would have maybe for planning would be, do we think we would get something back in the county in order to reconvene in 2 weeks here at the right time, do you think?
I don't know, that's a good question. I think Linda's usually about 3 weeks or so.
Would that be from today, or is that from something that already started?
That's from probably tomorrow. We haven't gotten that referral in yet.
So with that referral, does that fall under outstanding technical details, or is that?
No, I think the county needs the opportunity before this board acts, so, on the approval. We can, working with Brian, get something to you guys for the next meeting on the landscaping plan. I think the next meeting, probably that would be one of the major new elements, maybe a separate sheet,
Yeah, it sounds like maybe landscaping and issues, I think. So we can get that hashed out over the next few weeks. Now, can you get that quicker? I mean, we'll work to.
The intent is still to take down the big maple tree that exists right now.
On the latest plan, only one tree is shown. The other two have been previously cut prior to this application. They were dying and the applicant took care of them a year ago, maybe, 6 months ago, but. Yep, I think we talked about it on the phone with you and I. Clearly there was a base map survey that showed them, like said, hey, that they were gone, and so we've removed the two that looked like they were gonna be, proposed to be cut, and they're not, and the biggest deciduous tree that they were looking. I'm right, correct? Okay. Yep, so we've done everything we can to try to make it around these things. And I asked the question, Chairman, about the time. Just clearly there's enough time for us to work with the planning department on the PPP landscaping. At the next time that we meet, we should hopefully have a plan that is amenable.
I would guess, your worst case scenario would be the second meeting in September. To get a vote on that. And we have significant issues. If the county's expeditious, maybe, I don't know what the workload is, or what the work situation is in the county. Next meeting, maybe that, get a vote that, we'll see how things.
Sure. In the background, in the meantime, we'll certainly work with Dahlia and Adam in terms of, if the board would like to certainly see a separate exhibit, we have no problem doing that. Generally, as designers, we try to convey as much information on less sheets and things as possible. If the board feels they want something separate, that won't be a problem.
No, it seems like we've had pretty good dialogue here tonight or something that's.
Pretty simple, right?
Not
Probably the simplest thing you ever do tonight.
Not a casino.
No utilities, no nothing, right? We're not, no stormwater management.
No, so, that'll make a motion to accept the sketch plan for 44 Charter Road, Town of Coleman, LLC. County Eastern Motion Planning Board hereby accepts the sketch plan dated March 17th.
Correct.
2020, by American Engineering. Do I have a second?
Second.
Bird, we got that.
I got that one.
Roll call as follows, Chairman Matheson.
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Viola.
Yes.
Ms. Kubiak. Yes. Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Ms. Warren. Yes. Mr. Canton.
Yes.
Motion carried by 7-0 vote.
You got 2 weeks.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the board, good evening.
Thank you.
Next, we have ZBA reports. Start with ZBA Appeal.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank
Thank you, Mike. Oh,
Trust 8WR.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Is it good?
It's not, I want to make it controversial.
Do what you gotta do.
We look at me.
I can pass this around, I know you've got a couple of things. It's one of those situations where you have a 1920s home, and there was a back porch on it, and the applicant acknowledged that it was, being attacked by, bees. Okay, so they took it down.
We're getting stung by bees, they took the whole porch.
I got stung by a bee.
Oh,
I didn't know it was bad. So at any rate, they took it down, I'm assuming with a permit or whatever. And they wanted to put the porch back on, but they wanted an enclosed porch. They're calling it pre-season room, but they're not.
Thank you so much for opening that.
That needs an enclosed porch. They're gonna build it on piers. And in fact, from the photos, you can see they already put the helical posts in the ground, so you can see exactly where it's going. It's sloped back, and then they have one of those tiny garages that a minor car is not gonna fit into. I didn't call it that, because there's a reason for the 12-foot setback, and I assumed it was a fire safety thing or whatever.
For people, Kevin Hancock.
Yes. So, and he confirmed that, yeah, that, garages have combustibles in it, and there's a fire, they wanted that setback. And I talked to some other people, they said, well, if it collapses, they want it so far back, it starts on fire so it doesn't fall onto the main principal building. But in adding space there to create both an enclosed sitting area for themselves, and also, that's their rear egress onto the driveway, they would have to push it into the yard more, and that's causing it to be closer to the garage. And if they remove it to the left, if you look at the back of the building, they'd be right in front of the basement entry. They'd have to modify the construction plan. It would not be a simple porch anymore. They'd have to create an entryway to get into the basement, and I think there's a condenser out there too. They probably have to move. They wanted it centered on what was a later addition to when the building was built in 1920. And they wanted the gables lining up so that it's just a gable roof off the gable roof. And it'd be like maybe drop down maybe 8 inches so that they wouldn't have to affect the main roof. It's not blending it. I think they wanted it as affordable as possible and give themselves an enclosed sitting area. So I was looking at the garage and what they had in it, and it was just used for storage, and the combustibility thing and fire kind of got diminished in my mind, because it's not more than a shed at this point. They do have a shed behind it, and that's where they store the snow blower and well, you can chime in. That's my report. And lawnmower or whatever. Now, there was a little, motorcycle in there.
I told you.
I took a picture. I told the guy, get that motorcycle out, I gotta take a picture. It's a trike, yeah. It's a trike, it's probably Can-Am or something. Those things go fast, you go 200 miles an hour. Yeah. So I don't know if it's his or, I have no idea, I didn't ask him anything into that, but it's primarily storage. The bike is in the front of the garage, and that's how they're using it. So, I don't know, I would say the garage is not very tall either. I was talking to Ralph about that. Typical, it's not even, the garage door is like a 6'8", so maybe the wall is 7 foot, so if it did collapse, I don't think it would get down. I don't know, Jim, you're the architect, but, So I don't see it as a problem, but I know we're not supposed to render opinion. I'm just telling you what I saw on this, and
We're just making a recommendation strictly from the planning perspective.
right.
Right,
So
John?
what I'm seeing is most of the neighbors have these little garages, and they're all using them as storage sheds.
Yeah, I think the language recently is just for the board to adopt its report as it's all forward to the zoning board and offer a favorable recommendation on the area variance.
Would you like to make a favorable?
I don't feel there's a huge hazard here. I would. I mean, and I can see that it might become a problem with some of the other homes, depending if they really want to keep those garages or not. They could demolish those garages. I had a similar one in Albany when I was on Academy Road, and I kept it as a storage shed. But I did consider demolishing it just so it was away from the building.
Anyone opposed to this?
What's the size of the rebuilt garage?
The rebuilt porch.
The porch, it's the width of the, I think it's the square footage. It's the width of,
I think it's 250 square feet.
of,
I forgot my
So the porch reduces the separation from 12 to 5 feet.
Right, the
Yeah.
addition.
right.
I didn't, that one photo there was like,
How does that,
that's what was taken down.
is the new porch bigger than the old?
It's not wider, it goes back into the backyard further.
Got more
So,
depth?
yeah, so, and I don't know, he didn't put in his drawing what the old porch looked like. He being the, I guess the contractor did the sketch. I don't think that
That,
You can see the rim joist there. So, they left it down, so that,
they want to come out this way.
and they want to come out this way, where the old one was there, so they gave us a.
So is anyone opposed to adopting the report to the copy of
I'd like to make just one comment, that the 12-foot setback is for fire and life safety. And given it is a garage or a small shed, there are chances of them storing combustibles in that shed.
So there may, but they're gonna require a building permit, right, which we don't supersede the building code, so if there is an issue, we may have to build a firewall.
Well, that would be the,
But that's, I mean,
that's the point that I'm making, is that I don't know who's gonna catch that.
that's up to the building department.
Yeah, actually, the new porch might have to be.
Yeah, you might have to have fire rated on 3 walls.
Or not.
We're just making a recommendation on the variance. This thing is gonna have to be done. It's gonna have to have some.
I mean, I think if we identify that, we identify that to the building department to be aware of it.
Yeah. So we can condition it based on, you know, we recommend the building department review for fire and fire, they always do.
To mitigate the impact
Yeah.
of, like,
Review requirements for fire rated construction.
Kevin's not gonna like that.
I know. He's definitely not.
Well, I just wanted to make it, I just want to bring the point up. God forbid, you know, if something gets built and it catches on fire and burns the house down, it's gonna be, well, geez, why didn't we?
And also, I mean, this is just our recommendation to the ZBA, right, so they might tell us. We can certainly add that caveat in the motion.
I just see it as a recurring situation, given the number of buildings we have with these two garages.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of requests to redo them and catch them. House, Kevin did recommend to them that they build a breezeway between the two. And then.
Connect it.
Yeah, connect it. And they really didn't want to do that, they used to having it the way it is. The old porch came very close, but I can't tell you how close it was, but I suspect it wasn't 12 feet.
I mean, there are fire separation requirements, but I don't know what they are.
That means
I'm
additions.
just 12 fire rated sheetrock on the inside of that garage probably would be sufficient. Just like your garage in your home.
Well, attached garage would be built to her out.
And really, all that is what do for 2 hours, right? You're gonna have to get like that sheet rock, have to do 2 layers.
On the one side.
Right, just on the wall, one area where it's.
And whatever the spacing of the.
No,
That's all, I just
don't
wanna
wanna
make that point.
Yeah, we can, so,
From a planning perspective, I see the neighborhood, and the neighbors are not opposed to it, and they're all using their sheds in a different way, they don't even call them garages, they call them sheds. So, and they have to shovel, obviously, they have no place to put their cars, so they're used to that.
so, I'll make, does anyone else have anything else on this? I'll make a motion that we accept the Kubiak's, report with the condition, with our recommendation added to it that the building department ensure that all fire-related construction requirements are met. That makes sense.
It does, I think Kevin's gonna do that anyway.
Yeah, I know. We talked about it, so it's never. It's coming from me, so I'm going to say. Go ahead. Second one, Mr. Moore.
Roll call, Ms. Bostrom, Masson.
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Viola.
Yes.
Mr. Kubiak. Yes. Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Ms. Warren. Mr. Canton.
Yes.
Motion carried by 7-0 vote.
Bill 2020-07.
Give me 1 second.
Mr. Kent.
Anthony DiGiulio, wants to put an 18 by 16 foot shed in his backyard. He's fallen short of that 25 foot, not variance, setback that you're supposed to have in the residential district. It's gonna be 6 feet from the Holy Sepulchre into the cemetery, which is a long road. He's on 5 Rosebud Court, Rosebud Court parallels the Holy Sepulchre entryway. And it's got trees on either side of it, and then grass. And then his yard starts there, so he'll be 6 feet in from the property line. I looked over, I drove around a lot, and there are other sheds in the neighborhood, similar sheds. He has a patio in the back, he wants to use that for a base. And he pointed out that it's crumbling on the edges somewhat, but whatever, I guess his cousin's gonna cut it or he wants to use it as a base. That's, within the 6 feet. Actually, it's beyond the 6 feet border of the setback. And then I was looking, in the back, it's all grass, and there's, beautiful trees all the way along. No neighbors except on the other side of the road. So I don't think there'd be a problem because the neighbors aren't going to border the 6 foot setback. It's just a cemetery road. So I'm making a positive recommendation for the shed.
And Rosebud doesn't, none of Rosebud butts up to the actual cemetery itself, so it's not like you're gonna
No.
you're not gonna go visit.
No, the cemetery's quite a ways down, but this is the main road into the cemetery. And, I planted trees there years ago, they're all lined up, beautiful trees. And, but it'll be, rather, setback of 25 feet, setback of 6 feet.
Is that, 18 by 16 on the side of the garage, is there any problem with, a structure that size? Triggered by the zoning law?
I think that's why, so it's classified as an accessory building because it's, I think, it is subject to those setbacks, that's why they need the variance. If it were, I think, 150 square feet or less, it would just be 5 feet.
So the structure is allowed, but because of the type of structure, that triggers the area.
The size, it triggers the setback requirements that apply to structures in that.
So 10 by 15.
And then the variance difference is 6 feet compared to 25 feet.
There are structures right at the property line. opposed to positive recommendation? You are?
It's a four car garage. Four cars. Yeah, so that's, I can't tiles. That's what.
Does it change the view from the cemetery at all? I haven't heard.
The road going in.
It's just the road going in, you're not actually, so if you're visiting grandma at the cemetery, it's not impeding any view.
Rosebud stops short of the first, well short of the first. Right.
Cemetery's probably, there was a mile in.
Don, does he have a garage?
It's got a garage.
Yeah.
Got a deck in the back.
See a landscaper?
So why would he need it? You know why he needs it that big? I mean, could he make it comply? I mean,
I just,
you didn't ask.
I didn't ask.
We got a storage truck.
I'm nosy, I guess.
Yeah.
I was concerned about, the neighbors in the back. There aren't any.
Well,
But that's better complaining.
Five.
Looking at it on, Google, there aren't, the neighbors to the sides too, Don, there's not much, except, that's a pretty open yard, That would be a pretty, well, it would be different, that kind of structure in that.
I drove around the other streets. There's a lot of sheds up there. A lot of houses, but streets that are parallel. Sheds.
The only other thing that comes to mind, you build something that big, you gotta think about the roof, your pitch. So even though you have, it seems like a small footprint, you go to get trusses to span that, now you're 2.5 stories up in the air with the roof truss.
288, it's 18 by 16?
I guess that's what you can see.
288 square feet. How big is this room?
What is it, 18 by 100?
15 by 16.
16. Okay, so it goes to the, one tile over from the, it's above that, the first door there with the handle.
Yep.
And then out to this side of the podium.
I think the most I was allowed when I did my shed was a 10 by 10 or something like that. Yeah, it was small, so I kept it that way.
Yeah,
Let
let me see what the code says. I want to say it's 150 square feet.
So I guess, like the size of the post office.
Yeah, by 12, okay.
Yes, it is.
I got a 16 by 22 deck in the back. Back of my house. It doesn't look that big. I mean, I look at it all the time. It's not too big. It's bigger than it sounds.
Yeah, it's 10 feet by 12 feet in footprint, 15 feet in height. So, yeah.
What's the height of this?
I don't know.
I think that would be pretty important.
Yeah, the roof truss would be higher than that. Which street is it?
Rosebud. 5 Rosebud.
Right next to the cemetery road.
Third house.
It's well recorded. Who can vote on this?
Anybody except for Jim and Chris?
Make a motion to approve the August 12th minutes. Take my motion.
Who seconded those? What did-
Bergman.
I'm just approving. I'll, they're okay after that.
Roll call as follows, Chairman Maston,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Same.
Mr. Viola,
Yes.
Mr. Diak,
This is for the minutes.
yes.
Oh, yes.
That's Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Ms. Horn, Mr. Panton,
Yes.
motion carried by 5-0.
Hold on.
Has it been confirmed that the lot coverage would still comply with the shed? Because I'm thinking that property lines are, in line
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Is that's RV there?
Don, does the community idea what this is gonna look like in the package?
I just got this drawing here. All I have.
He's gonna do a driveway, he's gonna do a driveway right alongside the house. Right?
188 square feet for a shed, that's a, and the point about the trusses and the roof, that's gonna look like.
Especially if you're all wide open there.
Yeah,
I'm looking at the next door neighbor that seems to have a pretty big deck off the back of their house that would probably be about the same size, and they'd be sitting on their deck with a shed.
The, maximum lot coverage is 25% in the R2.
And if we would build it smaller, it would be no problem.
Yeah. But
It almost sounds like a shed that's.
Like an in-law shed. It's one of those in-law apartment sheds.
That's like 6 to 5 house.
He's right, it's 6 feet.
We read some of that, because I'm renovating a motel for women children, and, those rooms are like 200 square feet.
Yeah, I travel a lot for work, I mean, I think, I get a suite.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest room. I don't, it seems like we have folks that are against negative.
It's gotta be a public, the neighbors have to be notified, correct?
Yeah,
Letters went out.
That's what I was gonna say, I'm more concerned if the neighbors are opposed to it or not.
Can we just
The
not-
letters are
can we
going
not
out
do that?
Friday. The letters are going out Friday.
Hey, Don, do you know if it's gonna, where is it gonna be? Is it gonna be centered? I don't see where it's gonna be on this. Is it directly behind it, or? Because I'm wondering if he's gonna then try to put a paved area in to get to it from behind. That's
No, he didn't say that.
I wouldn't say either.
I know, right?
He's gonna need a driveway alongside the house. to get
That's
there.
it, that's,
This is pop, that's, you know, it's how accurate it is.
Yeah.
So, like, it's not a survey, it's back and forth.
Just put the wall over it.
Yeah.
Once the final.
Gonna put a second
good.
head door in the garage.
I mean, I'm just weary of, you know, there's another property on their dad that has a lot of small engine repair. I just don't wanna end up with another situation.
Is he gonna site build this, or is he buying a pre-made shed?
As far as I know, his cousin's gonna help him. One of them pre-made. They'll put it together.
Oh, okay.
They're gonna put it together.
Metal, is it metal?
I'm not sure.
You don't have
That's
a lot
just
of
a really,
information at all.
really large.
Yeah.
Here's an idea.
I forgot you were there. You're scared.
But, if, the report doesn't actually say to give a favorable recommendation, maybe just, forward the report, contents of the report in terms of, you know, planning perspective, and just give a neutral recommendation. The zoning board is gonna have a full public hearing with all the neighbors there too, so keep that in mind.
So make a motion to forward the report to the ZBA and not make a neutral recommendation, not positive or negative.
You guys before, I think, have just,
I mean, if you guys can't agree, it's up to you.
Yeah,
I think
I
we're
think in
gonna,
the past and during the resolution, when you guys haven't given a favorable one, I just have wrote that the planning board transmit the report to ZBA.
okay.
So it's gonna be.
Or provided a report to the
Yeah.
ZBA
Is
on
that
such
what
and
they're
such a
doing?
date, and that's it.
So So I would make a motion that, sorry, go ahead.
I don't think we have enough information to make a good planning,
So, so, that's a good point. So I would make a motion that we will forward the report to the ZBA, but the planning board does not have enough information to make a favorable or negative recommendation from a planning perspective on the variance. That sound okay, Joe?
Yeah.
Go ahead, second.
Aye.
Oh, sorry.
So Jim just seconded it?
What do you got?
I'm
Oh.
considering that I do have enough information.
You want negative?
I can just do the second vote.
Go ahead, second. Wait, I've never had a split vote before, I don't think, in 5 years. Go ahead, second. Take over, Swan.
Roll call as well, Chairman Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
No.
Mr. Viola?
No.
Ms. Kupiec?
no.
Wait. So I'm gonna make.
We've never, ever had a.
No, so then I take this back. I'll make a motion that we make a negative recommendation on the proposal. Sorry.
I thought we were just passing the report on.
We can't pass the report on it, if everyone votes down.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Then we can't pass the report on. So I'll make.
Well, Matt, why don't you do this? Why don't you take a vote as to who approves the motion, approves the, recommendation, and then if not, if you got more nays, then it's a negative recommendation.
Okay.
It's a name
So there's
now.
only the vote. You gotta get the-
So I make a motion to make a positive recommendation on the ZBA report.
Who's making me do that? Come on.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by
Chairman Mattson?
No.
Mr. Moore?
No.
Mr. Viola?
No.
Ms. Kupiec?
No.
Mr. Bergman?
No.
Already passed the threshold. Ms. Warren?
I guess I don't have as much a problem with it.
So you're a yes, Mr. Pan?
I'm more positive.
So it's
Wow.
2 to 5.
Could be right.
It's the most controversial thing we do.
I guess I'm just confused because it was gonna be a public hearing. You know, to me, it's,
The problem is well, Adam has said this, I don't go to meetings, or maybe Allison said this, that they actually do, I think, take my recommendations into consideration in meeting the zoning board. So regardless of the public hearing, just from the planning perspective, I think they actually hope they respect what we're setting up. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, I also look at it is that, we're looking at it, from a longer term, and sometimes with a little bit more foresight into some of this stuff. Whereas a neighbor is gonna say, okay, I don't wanna get my neighbor PO'd, but yet I don't wanna sit there and look at this big, when I sit on my back deck, I see this big structure, radiating heat off of the.
I still have the, when you rent a hotel, and they tell you the square footage, I just have stuck in my head, that this is the size of the biggest hotel room I've ever stayed in.
Yeah.
And then you add a roof to it,
Up there.
it's big.
We have no elevation, we have no idea what the exterior is gonna look like. We have no
It
idea.
seems like a commercial garage.
It does.
We have no idea where the driveway is coming, how he's gonna access it.
It's questionable whether this is a
Yeah.
shed. And that's the problem.
And what's the purpose as well?
And its purpose, correct, I mean, it could easily turn into a, mother-in-law.
Or
Well,
land
Storage, storage,
Wouldn't in my house.
Well, some of the zoning board members will definitely question what it's gonna be for the size, so it will come up.
I'm curious what the profession is. Landscapers, you work on cars.
Garage is,
we have a
get a permit?
What do you do with it? How high is it? Yeah.
For a she shed.
I wish.
Well, a lot
I
of it too, it
don't
has to
think
do
it's
with
quite
the,
that big, but.
it has to do with the layout of, or the lay of the land. If you look at those, when I looked at Google Maps and I seen that that 4 houses at least had visibility to everybody's backyard, and now you're gonna throw this 18-foot by 6, high structure back there, it's really, it doesn't blend with the character of the neighborhood.
And it's
It
different.
depends what it looks like,
If you-
though. If it's
right.
got, I mean, our shed has little
Right,
windows
if you were
and
tucking it,
shutters
right, if
and
you were
flower
tucking
boxes
it in
and
the
all
back,
that, so.
you've got a she shed.
And it depends what you would put up, like
Right.
if you're up against the woods.
That's right.
Also, I would go a long way if you got certain. Right? Yeah, I don't trust the.
An elevation, they show no elevation whatsoever.
So if they, worst case scenario, they get denied, they can come back with a new proposal and make whatever adjustments they choose.
Or built to a size where they didn't have to.
Or they
Joe, what do
can
you
also amend it during the ZBA process as well.
Hey, Don, does their existing garage have a back access garage door to it?
You think you're gonna drive through it?
Yeah, it would fit perfect the way they were laid out.
Alright, so we have 2 new ZBA referrals, one for 2020-08 for Generon, 81 Columbia Turnpike, and 3 area variances for signs. How big?
16 by 12. 12 by
Signed
16.
for the new addition that they were just.
It must be nice, Joe.
Yeah, I didn't want to call on you. Just make sure to close the meeting.
Wait, it's motion to close, right?
I was gonna remind you.
Put it on YouTube, watch you on YouTube and text me later.
Okay.
Alright, thanks.
Good night.
Anyone wants to?
I changed my vote to it now.
Too late? You were already decided.
I don't know.
I know, I just.
So does anyone want Regeneron?
That's cool, too.
I'll take it.
3 for a sign.
I'll take it.
Can't throw that far.
I'll get it.
Then we have 2020-09 Nick Trattoria for 2 area variances for signs.
I'll take that one. That's easier. No.
That's
I can beat that.
That's a new restaurant in
Yeah.
the Springhurst Plaza there.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
George Campbell. Anyone want it?
I can make it, I can be out of town.
Yeah, let's do it now. Me. Okay, let's do it.
There we go.
Any takers?
Come on, guys, there's like 6 more on the way too, so everybody's gotta start doing them. I just got loaded with a bunch of applications.
Yes. That's what I'm concerned about. The homeowners are doing a lot more in their yards now, with these little sheds and garages.
Well, actually, they're all signs coming.
This one's just signs.
They're all signs.
2 area variances for signs. For Nick Trattoria.
All right, I'll do that.
That's how it's spelled? How do you say it?
It's not in the planning board's town's jurisdiction, but I think with the garage, proposal on Rosebud, they may run into some deed restrictions.
Yes, they are. You know who lives on the end back there, don't you?
Yeah. I see.
Mike and Rose Christo, and when they get that certified, they're gonna be up in arms. That'll be a court issue, I'm sure, if he doesn't change it. Rosebud, there's deed restrictions, that's why you don't see any sheds in the backyard.
Yeah. Chris really wants to change her.
That's not our.
I was wondering, Jim, if you remembered that when we were talking, but I kept looking at you, waiting for you to say something, because that was during your time.
You guys
I remember it very clearly.
Alright, well, with that, I'm gonna make a motion to close the meeting. All in favor? Aye. Meeting is closed. Joe?